Tony Reali talks about Around the Horn ending. Ladies and gentlemen, the conversation is the Dan Patrick Show with Tony Reali. So Tony Reali and Around the Horn had their final episode on Friday, May 23rd. So I thought I'd wax poetic a little bit about the change in sports media and what Around the Horn was like back in the day. A little sidebar. So Woody Page from Around the Horn fame, obviously, he used to have a website where he would, I guess you could like apply kind of to be a just freelance writer, and you could write articles on this website. And when I was probably 20 maybe 21, 22, somewhere in there, I had applied and I wrote articles on that website, and I thought I was on top of the world. You know, Woody Page on ESPN, his website, whatever. And it's just funny, you know, to go back and look at it now and how things all played out. But we're going to listen to the conversation, talk a little bit, have a little casual convo. Enjoy yourself. Here we go.
How were you told that it was coming to an end?
Suddenly, then gradually, as all the good things in life. I read an article in the New York Post, my hometown paper, occasionally printed in English. And that was the first I heard that it was a possibility. Made a few calls to the people, of course, that I love, and we'll suss it out. And that's when I heard, no, we don't know where that came from. And we all know what that means. It came from somewhere. So that was over the summer of last year. I had my people look at things like ratings, as if that might matter or something like that. We were up. We were doing great. So I wasn't really worried. But, you know, once that toothpaste is out of the tube, you know what it is. So.
Okay, but do you sense the show is heading in a different direction? You know, why it got canceled. It's such a great show. And it felt like, was there too much money being spent, or was it too woke?
Too much money elsewhere. I mean, there certainly wasn't money. I can tell you that. I mean,
Around the Horn, and it, like Dan just kind of talked about, when you look back at what ESPN was and what ESPN programming was and what Around the Horn was, I mean, when you, like, the programming at that time was Around the Horn, PTI, sports reporters. It was legitimate sports conversation, and it was legitimate, you know, sports discussion, sports debate. And Around the Horn originally were just columnists. It was like Tim Cowlishaw, Bill Plaschke, Woody Page, Jay Mariotti, Bob Ryan, like legit columnists for big newspapers. And these guys were just sports guys. And that's what every show was on ESPN. Even Sports Center was sports people talking about sports. And that was it. And much like the rest of ESPN, it just kind of changed and it got away from what it originally was. You know, now if you watch ESPN, there was two big shifts in sports media. And I know I keep saying ESPN, but you can see this across all networks. I mean, Fox Sports did the same thing and still does it. But the first big shift was the embrace debate, which was Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith. And that changed the discussion from being this open sports discussion between knowledgeable sports people, right? Like Bob Ryan, hard to be better. And all of a sudden now it was like a shouting match. It was this WWE style, you know, shock, like hot takes and shock jock kind of radio. And that's what it moved towards for a long time. Now it's shifted again into this kind of circus where it's less about the sports and it's more about the personalities, and it's less about the actual debate or the actual talking point. It's more of just like the dumbing down of everything, like the Pat McAfee show and even the Shannon Sharp's nightcap and all that, where it's supposed to be less serious. It's supposed to be less about the sports. It's supposed to be less about the breakdowns of the games and all that, and more about the yucks and more about it's kind of turned into that Adam Sandler movie kind of vibe, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with Happy Gilmore, right? All good. But some people would rather watch a comedy like My Cousin Vinny, right? A little bit more cerebral. And that's what's happened. Around the Horn went from the Bob Ryans of the world and all that to more of a platform for people to kind of take their own personal stands. And so the show kind of got lost within itself.
And the woke it's a fine headline to write. I don't believe what that is. I honestly think we did 50,000 topics over 23 years.
Yeah.
If you're going to tell me 10 or 15 drew an eyebrow up, I'll be like, yeah. I mean, we were doing some complex topics from time to time. I don't mute people in FaceTime. So maybe there's 2 or 3 there that didn't have the back and forth you would want. Maybe there's 1 or 2 I would take back if you asked me. Those aren't my regrets.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a downfall of the show. I do think as everything has changed, like the people on the show have their own platforms. The people on their show have their Twitters and their Instagrams and whatever, and their own personal brands. So yeah, there were some FaceTimes at the end of the show where they get on a soapbox and they preach a little bit. That's a bad way to end the show. You know, you turn that on. You turn SportsCenter on or ESPN on to get away from all that. You know, you come home from work, come home from school, and you're going to watch some sports talk, some sports debate. You don't want the end of the show to be a soapbox. You know, you don't want it to be someone preaching to you about some societal issue. You know, you care about the Knicks versus the Pacers. You care about the Western Conference Finals in the NHL. You care about Monday Night Football. Like, you don't want to hear about, you know, whatever else is going on.
Not at all. So the reality of the show being the most eclectic, and it's not a negative word for me, diverse show in the history of the television medium. We got people 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all on a level playing field. We have men, we have women, all on a level playing field. You're going to tell me that that's never going to be a negative to me, even though times have changed and things are viewed differently now. I know the people who were part of our show are getting other jobs at our network, front-facing jobs, wonderful jobs. That
it was a launching point. I mean, Around the Horn was a launching point because if you were good and you could make your points and you were entertaining and you could win the debates and you could do all that stuff, you did get a platform to create a podcast or have your own show or get put on other shows. So, I mean, we've seen some people on Around the Horn have huge careers, you know, after. So, yeah, it was absolutely a launching pad for careers.
Are at our highest properties.
But I can't imagine with your excitement, your enthusiasm, your energy, you go into management.
Yes.
And can't convince them.
I said, let me play it however you see it. I can get rid of the mute button. If you don't like the game show element, we'll bring in switchers. We'll bring in athletes every now and then. But I believe the show is based and the bones of the show is journalism. And when this one goes away, there ain't any more.
See, exactly what I was talking about. So something that sports media and all media, I guess, do that I think is bad is that once the winds change, they go all in with the change. So when it was an embrace debate, every show was embrace debate. Whenever it was what it is now, which is like this new, like kind of hokey, kind of slapstick kind of vibe, every show is like that, right? Every show. So then all of a sudden you're looking around like, man, I want to watch something else. You know, like I want to watch, there should be a blend. There should be embrace debate. And then there should be tried and true sports talk. Then there should be kind of the slapstick kind of shows. Then it shouldn't all be one thing and then another thing and then another thing and then just kind of ride those changes, which is how it is. That seems to be how it always is. And Reali is right. Once Around the Horn goes away and PTI goes away, it's just going to be all the same. And it's going to be, unfortunately, it's kind of crazy, but it's like, I'm not sure. Well, I do know the answer, and we'll talk about this probably later in the video. But once those shows goes away, ESPN is like the last place you're going to go for actual sports, which is crazy. It's crazy to think about, but it's funny because you can look at MTV, and you're like, "Damn, I think it's exactly what happened to MTV." Right? MTV was music videos. That's all it was. And then what happened? You started seeing these shows pop up, right? And then once a show got popular, the entire network was just those kinds of shows. And then it just swung from show to whatever. And then MTV became the last place you would go for music videos, right? And that's what ESPN is becoming. It's becoming the last place you go for actual sports talk.
Because I love Tony and Mike. They're not writing in the Washington Post on deadline tomorrow. Bill Plaschke is. Tim Kalishaw is. Right now, Tim Kalishaw is going to be working hard to be on the finale of Around the Horn, the show he gave his blood, sweat, tears, and sobriety to. He went straight to sobriety while during the show. And one of the most proud things I can say of our show is the growth that we've all been able to have through the support of each other. He's going to be either in Edmonton, or Dallas for this, because again, the ombudsman of the schedule. Can we get an NHL schedule out earlier? But imagine he's in Edmonton, and I'm having a rogue camera shoot him. He's shooting it on an iPhone. All right, Tim, nice career you had with us. See you later.
But these were suggestions that you had.
I threw them out to my immediates, the great Eric Rydholm and Aaron Solomon. And I also then had a chance after some time to convey them to some people, or at least put my words out there. I mean, these were conversations I wanted more of.
Okay, but mute button and athletes?
Yeah, I'm speaking very frankly here. I would throw out the kitchen sink. I know what I can do on TV, and it's not just a mute button and a scoring system. I don't, so I know
I think Reali is great. I think he's great at what he does. I agree with him. I think he's fantastic, and he'd be good at whatever they want him to do. He'd be good at.
Could host different shows for this network, and I know they could want different shows. I understand that part of it. I went through 9 months where I did some education on myself and on the industry. How has the industry changed, right? And I'm aware of things now that may be by product of me siloed away doing a show the way I only saw fit. I know I had to carry a weight for 23 years. I respected that. I know 4,953 episodes doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen even with somebody's also doing a podcast and a streaming show and covering games on weekend. I know what I needed to put to do that. So now I'm trying to imagine, well, what else could the network want? And I would love to have that conversation still.
You're staying at ESPN.
I have a contract through the end of August, and I am having many great
this August.
Yes, 2 months. The show says goodbye Friday, and I'm happy to have the next 2 months to talk to everybody and anybody in the world, including ESPN.
But if you're... I was wondering about this, that you did that, but were you going to do other things like Wilbon does?
Oh, yeah, I was ready. I was in a place now where I wanted to get the home life where I wanted it to be. And I had done Good Morning America as a correspondent for some years. It was 4 years in total. It wasn't, exactly where I thought it was going, and I think they would say the same of me, but it was a very fruitful experience and educative in that way. So I have now Google Documents full of game shows, kids shows, just because I wanted to stretch my personality out a little bit. But then, the same type of fare that I would love to make in TV and sports. Absolutely.
He probably would be great on like a game show. He would be a great choice to host next time there's a turnover in a radio show. But he'd be good at it. My prediction for sports media, and I've said this a million times, I think we are swinging quickly. We're swinging quickly away from the athlete-driven shows and the kind of the slapstick shows. I think people really want substance, and I think people really like sports, and they want a combination of that. And I think if you look at someone like Bill Simmons or Ryan Russillo, it is not surprising that their show is taking off. Or they're not taking off, but their shows are doing so well and arguably better than ever because that's what they are. They are a normal, down-to-earth guy. I don't think we're swinging back enough to go back to the Bob Ryan days of like dry journalism, long-form columns. I don't think we're swinging that far. I don't think people want that seriousness. They want sports to be sports. They want legitimate analysis, takes. They want their people to be doing their homework. They want people to watch the games. They want people to know who's on the teams and all that. And if I had to point to a group that's doing it the best, I would point to Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo. They are funny, but not slapstick. They are unserious, but serious about the game. And they watch and study it, and they live it and breathe it. And they don't have to. I mean, Bill Simmons, whatever, made sound like a $100 million contract with HBO. He doesn't have to do this. But he's going live and watching every NBA game. Ryan Russillo's watching tape and all of that. That's what people want. People want, in whatever style, whether it's a podcast or social media or a YouTube channel or however they consume it, but that's what people want. And that's where I think sports media is headed in the very, very, very close future. I think shows that, and I have an interesting lens on this because my show or my channel reacts to a lot of different shows. So I see how the audience feels about certain shows or certain types of shows that we react to. And I can tell you, whenever it's the show with a panel full of athletes and you can tell they just either don't watch the game or don't know what they're talking about and they're just kind of going off face and name value, that's a horrible reaction. When it's a show with that kind of that slapstick unseriousness, horrible reaction. There has to be a blend of personality, reverence for the sport, and by reverence I mean you have to actually care about the sport, watch the sport, know about it, whatever, and then legitimate analysis. It's not good enough to just read a depth chart. It's not good enough to say this guy's good or this guy's bad. You have to know why. And I think gambling has a lot to do with that. People are putting their hard-earned money on games and player props and fantasy sports or whatever. So they expect to know why they're doing that, right? If you say the Kansas City Royals are going to beat the Milwaukee Brewers, well, tell me why. And if you tell me why good enough, I'll go bet on it. And then it'll be fun for all, right? But it's just crazy to think about ESPN when I was growing up. I mean, even like Baseball Tonight. Baseball Tonight was incredible in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was absolutely fantastic. I don't even know if Baseball Tonight's still around. I have no idea. But back then, you watch that, you were up to date on Major League Baseball. You were up to date on what's going on. Now, you probably had to find some podcast. You got to find some podcast to stay up to date on baseball. They probably don't even show it on ESPN. It's just not. It's crazy because, like I said earlier, sports and highlights and analysis and breakdown no longer has a spot on ESPN. Crazy, right? Just like music videos, at a certain point, music videos no longer had a spot on MTV, which is crazy. Absolutely insane. But it happens. It happens. Food Network, great example. Food Network used to be all cooking shows. It used to all be a chef teaching you how to cook, a well-respected chef teaching you how to cook. Some shows were way more serious food and way more technically intense. Some shows were much more of like, okay, well, here's how you bake this, for your kids or whatever. Here's how to do your weekday dinner in 20 minutes, whatever. But it was still a cooking show. And then what happened? Food Network all of a sudden became where you couldn't find a cooking show to save your life. All of a sudden it was Diner, Driving, and Dives and Guys Grocery Games and whatever other, slapstick kind of weird show. Not, nothing wrong with it, and that's all it became. And then the last place you would go to find a cooking show was Food Network. It's crazy, but it happens. Happens across all forms of media, right? All forms of media fall prey to it, and ESPN is the latest. But I really think that YouTube, podcast, all that, I'm not splitting the atom here, but I think that's where people are going. And I just can't imagine watching some of these shows on ESPN and Fox Sports where you can tell that the people on the show are not watching the games. They have no clue who's on the field. They are not doing any of their homework, and they're just mailing it in. And then you go watch some podcasts where a guy's like, oh, yeah, last night I actually stayed up for 14 hours straight watching every snap from blank third-string running back. Here's my thoughts. So it's out there. But kudos to Around the Horn. Awesome show. I watched it was part of my routine. Come home, watch Around the Horn, watch PTI, the Bill Plaschke, Jay Mariotti, like I said, Bob Ryan, Woody Page, Kalishaw, J.A. Adonde, all those guys were definitely who that was the era when I was watching. It was a great show, and it was super fun. I had dreams of being on Around the Horn. I thought, man, this is a great medium for me, like a, quick debate, quick topic, quick thing. So I always thought, like, man, if I could just get to Around the Horn, and I never had the opportunity, obviously, but great show. Hate to see it leave. Like I said, I understand it is what it is. I think there's certainly a place for it, just like I think there's a place for like TRL and MTV. And a show like that gets cut for 2 more hours of ridiculousness, but similarly, I think people will sour on certain shows and certain kind of styles, and then it'll shift again, and it'll continue to shift and continue to shift. But there you go. So tip of the cap to Around the Horn. Reali will land on his feet, no doubt about it. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know in the comments below. Did you watch Around the Horn? What did you think about it ending? And where do you think sports media is going? Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video.